So I recently went through something I never thought I'd experience in my own home, and it still makes my chest tighten just thinking about it. Imagine waking up one morning, stepping outside with your coffee, only to find strangers' cars scattered across your land like it was a public parking lot. Not just one or two, rows of them, SUVs, sedans, even a golf cart, lined up like they belonged there. And then your eyes catch something that shouldn't exist. A bright blue HOA parking sign hammered right into the middle of your field. My field. For a long moment, I just stood there, gripping the mug in my hand, my brain trying to process the sight. It wasn't just near the edge of my property, it was planted deep in the center of my land, as if someone had already claimed it. I felt heat rush into my chest, a slow, simmering rage rising with every second I stared at that sign. I walked over, ripped the thing straight out of the dirt, and marched toward the nearest car. A middle-aged woman, draped in the smug aura only an HOA could produce, lowered her sunglasses like I was the one intruding. "Excuse me," she said, annoyance dripping from her voice. I gestured at the ground beneath her wheels. "This is my property." She blinked, tilted her head, and said words that made my blood run cold. "Oh no, this is HOA overflow parking." "Overflow parking on my land." I clenched my jaw, keeping my tone steady. "No, this is my land." Her frown deepened, as if I was inconveniencing her. "Well, I was told homeowners could park here if the clubhouse lot was full." "By who, of course," she shrugged. "The HOA." And that was the moment I realized I wasn't just dealing with a neighborly misunderstanding. This was something darker, something entitled, something that was going to get ugly. I walked the perimeter of my land that day, hoping I'd seen the worst of it. But I was wrong. Joggers were cutting across my fields as if they were public trails. The grass had worn down from the tire tracks of cars driving through. And then I saw something that made my chest tighten in disbelief. A family on my land, with folding chairs, a picnic basket, and a cooler, like they were in some county park. The father wore an HOA polo shirt, bold letters stitched across his chest as he casually unwrapped a sandwich. "Hey," I called out, forcing my voice to stay calm, though inside my blood was boiling. "You realize you're trespassing, right?" He looked up, chewing slowly, and said the kind of words only an entitled HOA puppet could mutter with a straight face. "Oh, well, technically, this land has been used by the community for years." I crossed my arms, staring him down. "Used." He smiled, one of those fake, condescending smiles. "Yes, the neighborhood has always enjoyed this space. It's an established common area." "Common area, my private land." And then I saw it, tacked onto a post nearby. A neighborhood map distributed by the HOA, marked up with labels and boundaries. And sure enough, my land was stamped in bold letters. Community green space. That was the moment my jaw locked, my vision tunneled, and I realized what was happening. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. The HOA had claimed my land, printed maps, put up signs, convinced homeowners that my property was theirs to use. I tore the sign down, crumpled it in my fist, and whispered words I didn't even realize had left my lips until later. "This isn't over." Because in that moment, something shifted inside me. This wasn't about a few cars or a picnic. This was about dignity, about respect, about the one thing I thought I'd bought with this land, peace. And if the HOA thought they could strip that away from me, they were about to learn what it meant to pick a fight with someone who wasn't backing down. Everyone told me to let it go. "It's just neighbors. Just talk it out. Don't make a big deal." But let me ask you, how do you let it go when you find your life being stolen piece by piece? When the ground beneath your feet is quietly being claimed by people who smile in your face while hammering their signs into your soil? I didn't want to fight. I wanted peace. That's why I bought this land in the first place. But peace had already been broken the moment the HOA stamped their logo over my property. And if there's one thing you should know about me, it's that I don't roll over. The next morning, I marched straight into the heart of enemy territory, the HOA clubhouse. The building itself was a monument to control, gleaming glass walls, polished oak doors, the kind of place that tries too hard to look important. I didn't bother with pleasantries. The receptionist barely looked up from her gum chewing when I said, "I need to speak to Karen." Her chin tilted toward a glass-walled office, and there she was. Karen, queen of the HOA, sitting behind a desk so oversized it looked comical. The walls around her weren't decorated with art or family photos, they were plastered with framed awards of herself. Ribbon cuttings, fundraisers, community leader of the year. It wasn't an office. It was a shrine to her ego. I didn't knock, I didn't wait. I slammed the stolen HOA map and the ripped-out parking sign onto her desk. Her eyes flickered for the briefest second, then she smiled. That kind of cold, practiced smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Ah," she said smoothly, like I was just another appointment on her calendar. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" I jabbed my finger at the map. "You want to explain why my private property is labeled as community green space?" She leaned back, laced her fingers together, and gave a tiny sigh. "Oh, that." She tilted her head, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "There's no need to get upset. This is all just a big misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" I repeated, my voice sharp. "Yes," she kept that smile plastered in place. "You see, Oak Ridge Estates has always used that land for recreational purposes. It's been an informal community space for years. The homeowners simply assumed." "Assumed?" I cut her off, leaning closer. "That land has never been part of your HOA, ever. Your assumptions don't mean a damn thing." Her smile twitched, but she recovered quickly. She reached into her desk, pulling out a thick binder full of color-coded tabs. Flipping with practiced fingers, she landed on a page and slid it across the desk. "There's something called prescriptive easement," she purred. "When land has been used by the public for an extended period of time, the board has the right to request an easement review." It was a performance, legal jargon dressed up to scare me, but the problem for Karen was I wasn't stupid. I leaned in, planting my palms on her desk. A prescriptive easement requires an official claim, a court ruling, and years of uncontested use. And even then, Karen, it doesn't transfer ownership. Her mask slipped just for a second, a flash of irritation in her eyes. "Well," she said quickly, flipping to another page, "the reality is that the community has a history of using that land. It's only fair everyone continues to benefit." "Fair," she actually said, "fair." I laughed, low and humorless. "Fair would have been asking permission before you trespassed. Fair would have been not committing fraud by printing my land on your maps. Fair isn't stealing." Her smile dropped completely now, replaced with something sharper. "This doesn't have to be a fight," she said coldly. "If you're open to negotiation, the board may be willing to offer compensation for shared access." Compensation. She was suggesting I rent my own land from her. I shook my head slowly, meeting her eyes. "Oh, Karen, you really don't get it, do you?" Her face hardened. "There's no need to be difficult." I stood, gathering the sign and map from her desk. "I'm not being difficult. I'm shutting this down." That's when she delivered the threat. Cool, composed, deliberate. "You should know," she said, her voice cutting through the glass office walls. "The board has already approved an assessment of your property for community use. If you refuse to comply, we may have no choice but to take legal action." I turned back slowly, meeting her gaze with a smile that wasn't friendly. "Go ahead, take all the legal action you want. And when you do, the court will see every fraudulent map, every fake sign, and every word that's come out of your mouth." Her jaw tightened, the mask was slipping. "Karen," I said softly, leaning just close enough for her to feel the weight of my words. "You don't know what difficult looks like, but you're about to." And I walked out, leaving her sitting behind her oversized desk, rattled for the first time. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. You ever get one of those envelopes that makes your stomach twist before you even open it? Thick paper, bold red letters stamped across the front, the kind designed to scare you into thinking your life is about to collapse. That's what landed in my mailbox a few days after I walked out of Karen's office. It wasn't from a real court, it wasn't from a law firm, but the HOA had done everything they could to make it look official. Oak Ridge Estates legal department, except there was no legal department, just Karen hiding behind stationery and intimidation. I tore it open, skimmed the first line, and couldn't help but laugh. "Final notice, you are in violation of Oak Ridge Estates community access policies. Failure to comply will result in legal action, including fines, liens, or property assessment." Liens on my property, my private HOA-free property. The audacity was staggering. I flipped to the next page, and there it was, a list of fines that looked like they had been pulled straight from a cartoon villain handbook. $500 for unauthorized restriction of public access. $750 for noncompliance with HOA aesthetic standards. $11,000 for interference with community functionality. $11,000 for interfering with a community I didn't even belong to. I tossed the papers on my kitchen table, shaking my head in disbelief. Karen wasn't just bluffing anymore. She was building a fake case, brick by fraudulent brick. And if I had been anyone else, someone who didn't know the law, someone who didn't know their rights, I might have actually been afraid. But instead, I poured myself a cup of coffee and ignored it. Silence is sometimes the loudest answer you can give. And that silence, it drove her insane. 2 days later, I opened my front door to find them standing there. 4 board members lined up at the edge of my driveway like soldiers waiting for orders. They weren't on my property, not yet, but they were close enough to make a point. Watching, waiting. I leaned against my truck, coffee in hand, pretending they were nothing more than a mild inconvenience. "Morning," I said casually. "Something I can help you with." The tallest one, a man in khakis and a golf visor, cleared his throat. "We're here on behalf of Oak Ridge Estates to discuss the ongoing violations regarding community accessibility." I sighed, raising a hand. "Let me stop you right there. I'm not in your HOA. You don't have authority over my land. We're done here." But Karen's number 2, a woman with a clipboard, sharp glasses, and an attitude, took a step forward. Her voice was syrupy sweet, the kind people use when they think they're talking to a child. "That's where you're mistaken," she said. "The HOA has a long-established right to this land. The board has voted unanimously to assess your property for shared community use." "Assess my property," I repeated slowly, raising an eyebrow. She nodded, smile tight. "Yes, since you've made it clear you do not wish to cooperate, we'll be moving forward with an easement review." An easement review. There it was again, the same legal trick Karen had tried to play in her office. They thought if they said the words enough times, I'd cave. Instead, I smiled, not the friendly kind, the kind that carries weight. "Good luck with that." Her lips thinned. "If you refuse to comply, we'll have no choice but to take further legal action." I tilted my head. "You mean more fake notices, more phony fines? You people must be really bored." Her face flushed. "This is a formal warning." I stepped forward just enough that she instinctively took a step back. My voice was low, steady. "Let me give you a warning. If I see a single one of you step foot on my land again, I'll press trespassing charges. No warnings, no second chances. You have no claim here. None." The board members shifted uncomfortably, exchanging nervous glances. Because they knew this wasn't bluster, this wasn't a threat, it was a promise. They backed away slowly, but I could see it in their eyes. Karen wasn't going to stop. She couldn't stand being told no. She had built her little kingdom on fear and control, and now she'd met someone she couldn't intimidate. And when people like Karen feel cornered, they don't back down. They escalate. I just didn't realize how far she was about to go. You ever get a voicemail that makes your blood run cold? The kind that sounds ordinary at first, until you realize it's not meant for you at all. That's exactly what I heard one morning when my phone buzzed with a cheerful voice. "Hi there, just following up on your interest in purchasing a premium lot in Oak Ridge Estates. Let me know if you'd like a tour of the available properties." I frowned, played it back twice. Premium lot? I already owned land here. Why would I be looking to buy? I hit redial and a man named Greg answered, his tone polished and professional. "Yes, we've still got a few lots left with exclusive community amenities," he said. I rubbed my temple. "Greg, I think there's been a mistake. I already own land here." A pause, then an awkward chuckle. "Oh, you do?" "Yeah, and last I checked, my land isn't for sale." The silence on the other end told me everything. Papers shuffled. Then his voice dropped an octave. "Well, the HOA listed several lots as part of their expanded recreational space, all with deeded homeowner access." The words hit like a hammer. Deeded access. "Where exactly is this expanded recreational space?" I asked, my voice tight. He hesitated, then read off an address. My stomach dropped. It was my property. I thanked him through clenched teeth, hung up, and opened my laptop, and what I found made my blood boil. The HOA's official website had been updated, proudly advertising exclusive private trails, event space, and premium green space available to all Oak Ridge residents. A map highlighted the area in HOA colors. My area, my land. But it didn't stop there. I clicked through the welcome packet for new buyers, and my rage deepened with every page. They'd branded my fields as the Oak Ridge Private Trails. They'd plastered photos of my land across their brochures. They had even sold memberships for access. This wasn't just entitlement anymore. This was fraud. And yet, before I could even reach for my phone to call a lawyer, they made their boldest move yet. The very next day, I walked outside and froze. Workers were on my land, not neighbors, not joggers, hired workers moving like they owned the place. One sat on a riding mower, trimming my grass. Another hammered a post into the ground. When I got close enough to read the fresh sign, my chest tightened with fury. Welcome to Oak Ridge Private Trails, HOA members only. That was it. That was the moment I knew Karen had crossed a line she could never come back from. She wasn't just harassing me. She wasn't just pretending. She was profiting, selling access to my land, convincing strangers it was theirs, and now she was landscaping my property like it already belonged to her. I felt a strange calm wash over me, the kind that comes when you know you're done playing games. She thought this was power. She thought this was control. But all she'd done was hand me everything I needed to burn her little empire to the ground. I pulled out my phone and took photos of everything. The workers, the sign, the mower tracks across my fields, evidence, cold, undeniable evidence that Karen had turned trespassing into a business model. I didn't confront the workers. They were just pawns in her game. I let them finish hammering in their precious sign, let them manicure the grass they thought belonged to their queen. Because when it was over, I'd have more than proof. I'd have a case so ironclad that not even Karen's binder of fake laws could save her. That night, as I spread the photos across my kitchen table, something inside me shifted. I wasn't just fighting back anymore. I was preparing for war. Karen had mistaken silence for weakness. But she was about to learn that when you push someone past their breaking point, you don't get control. You get consequences. And her consequences were coming. Some battles are fought with words, others with walls. And when I saw strangers mowing my grass under an HOA sign that read members only, I knew exactly what kind of battle this was. I didn't call the workers off. I didn't scream. I didn't give Karen the satisfaction of a reaction. Instead, I made one phone call to a contractor I trusted. Because if Karen thought my land was her playground, I was about to lock the gates for good. What went up over the next few weeks wasn't a fence. It was a fortress. Reinforced steel posts sunk deep into the ground. Heavy-duty anti-climb panels. Motion-activated security cameras mounted like watchful eyes. I mapped every access point the HOA had been exploiting. Dirt trails worn down by joggers, makeshift parking spaces carved by SUV tires, even gaps in the tree line, and sealed them all. Every path, every shortcut, every loophole, gone. When it was finished, my property wasn't just private, it was impenetrable. The day the last panel locked into place, I stood on my porch with a fresh cup of coffee, waiting. Because I knew Karen wouldn't ignore this. And sure enough, she came storming down the road like a queen whose castle had just been set on fire. Her car screeched to a stop, and within seconds she was at the fence, flanked by 2 board members. Her arms flailed, her voice sharp and shrill, echoing across the steel. "What is this?" she shrieked, shaking the fence like she could tear it down with sheer entitlement. "You can't do this." I sipped my coffee, calm as the morning breeze. "This," I gestured to the towering steel, "this is my property and you're trespassing." Her face turned red, her words tumbling over themselves. "You are interfering with community access. You are obstructing homeowners' rights to—" I cut her off, my voice steady, quiet, deliberate. "This land was never yours, and now it never will be." Her jaw tightened, but before she could spit more poison, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a thick folder. Inside, a cease and desist order filed by my lawyer. Pages accusing the HOA of trespassing, fraudulent real estate claims, and unauthorized commercial use of private land. All stamped and signed. I flipped it open just enough for her to see the ink. "By the way," I said, calm as ever, "you're being sued." For the first time, Karen froze. The color drained from her face. The board members behind her shifted uncomfortably, their confidence cracking. Because suddenly this wasn't just about fences and signs. This was about courtrooms, about real consequences. She stammered, reaching for some kind of comeback, but the words died in her throat. "Go home, Karen," I said softly. "Your little game is over." And with that, I turned and walked back to my porch, leaving her clawing at the steel barrier that now stood between her greed and my peace. That night, for the first time in months, I slept easy. No joggers cutting through my fields, no SUVs squatting on my lawn, no picnic baskets unfolding under my trees, just silence, just the sound of land that finally belonged to me again. But here's the thing about people like Karen. They don't know when to quit. They don't see walls as boundaries, they see them as challenges. And the moment she realized she couldn't control me with fake fines or intimidation, she played her last, desperate card. Because when someone builds their empire on fraud, there's only one way it ends. Collapse. And Karen's collapse was coming faster than she knew. You could feel it the moment the lawsuit landed. The air shifted. The neighborhood, once filled with whispers of HOA pride, suddenly felt tense, heavy, uncertain. And for the first time since this war began, Karen wasn't strutting around like she owned the place. She was cornered. The cease and desist wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a match, and the fire it sparked spread fast. Investigators began digging. What started as a simple property dispute quickly snowballed into something much darker. Fraud, forged signatures, misused HOA funds. Every stone they turned over exposed rot that Karen had carefully buried for years. And here's the thing about corruption. It hides well when no one's looking. But the moment light hits it, it unravels like thread in the rain. Homeowners who had once parroted Karen's rules began to question everything. Wait, you mean the HOA never actually owned that land? You're telling me our fees paid for what? The same people who once trespassed on my property with smug entitlement now realized they had been duped. Their exclusive private trails weren't a benefit, they were a scam. And the anger that had once been directed at me, it turned on her. Karen tried to bluff, of course. She always did. She sent letters dripping with empty confidence, tried to hold emergency board meetings in her glass office, even went door-to-door spinning stories about how I was the aggressor. But lies don't stand when proof stacks up against them, and I had proof. I'll never forget the day one of her own board members came to me, folder in hand, eyes darting nervously. Inside were copies of financial statements, payments that didn't add up, expenses that had no receipts, checks signed with names that weren't hers but somehow looked suspiciously identical. It wasn't just trespassing anymore. It was embezzlement, fraud, forgery. The walls of her empire were caving in. And yet Karen didn't stop. She couldn't. The power she had wielded for so long had become her identity. Without it, she was nothing. And that's the thing about people like her. They'd rather set fire to everything around them than admit they lost. She tried one last tactic, a smear campaign. Flyers slid under doors, accusing me of being a liar, a manipulator, a thief. She even called a neighborhood meeting, standing in front of the crowd with her practiced smile, trying to convince them that she was the victim. But this time, no one clapped, no one nodded, no one believed her. Because the truth was already out, and once people see the truth, they don't forget it. The lawsuit rolled forward, steady and relentless. Every court date peeled back another layer of Karen's schemes, and with each revelation, the HOA's foundation cracked deeper. I'd drive past the clubhouse sometimes, that oversized monument to her ego, and see fewer and fewer cars in the lot. Meetings that once overflowed with homeowners shrank to a handful of stragglers, each one more disillusioned than the last. The empire Karen built on intimidation was collapsing, not with a bang, but with silence. The silence of neighbors turning their backs. The silence of board members resigning one by one. The silence of a queen realizing her crown was nothing more than cheap tin. And me, I stayed quiet. I didn't gloat. I didn't taunt. I didn't need to. The walls I built weren't just steel, they were unshakable proof that my land was mine. The lawsuit wasn't revenge, it was justice. And justice has a way of speaking louder than any HOA president ever could. But even as I watched her influence crumble, I knew the story wasn't finished. Because for all the fraud, for all the lies, for all the years of control, Karen wasn't facing just embarrassment. She was facing consequences no fence could keep out. You ever watch someone walk into a courtroom still convinced they're untouchable? That was Karen. Chin-high designer blazer pressed, lips curled into that same poisonous smile she'd worn behind her oak desk. To her, this wasn't justice. It was just another meeting, another stage for her performance. But here's the truth about courtrooms. They don't bend for charm. They don't care about HOA titles. They care about evidence. and I had plenty. The judge shuffled through the files, page after page of proof, fraudulent maps, fake signs, trespassing photos, financial statements with signatures that didn't match. Each document was a nail in the coffin she had built for herself. At first, she tried to spin it. She stood there, hands folded neatly, and said the words she'd been rehearsing for years. "Your Honor, this has all been a misunderstanding. The community simply believed." "Believed," the judge cut her off, eyes narrowing, "or were led to believe." Her voice faltered for the first time. The prosecutor leaned in hard. "Isn't it true, Ms. Karen, that you personally authorized marketing materials labeling the defendant's land as Oak Ridge Private Trails? Isn't it true you accepted HOA fees for access to land you did not own?" Her smile twitched. "Well, technically." "There is no technically," the prosecutor snapped, slamming a photo onto the desk. "It was one of my fields, freshly landscaped, with that HOA sign reading members only. This is trespassing, this is fraud, and this," he held up a balance sheet, "is embezzlement." The room went silent. For once, Karen had no comeback, no binder of excuses, no board members to back her up. Just silence and the sound of her empire crumbling under the weight of her own lies. And then came the neighbors. One by one, they took the stand. Former supporters, now witnesses, their voices shook with anger, betrayal, shame. "She told us it was common property. She said our fees went to maintaining it. She promised access, and we believed her." Every word chipped away at the image Karen had built. The queen of the HOA was being stripped bare in front of the very people she once ruled. I sat there quietly watching, not smug, not gloating, just steady, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth, and the truth was undeniable. By the time closing arguments began, the outcome was already written. The judge leaned forward, his voice carrying a finality that echoed through the room. "This court finds that Karen knowingly and willfully engaged in fraudulent activity, trespassing, and unauthorized use of private property. Restitution is to be paid in full. Additionally, given the scope of the embezzlement, this court rules that prison time is warranted." Prison. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Karen's face drained of color. For the first time, she wasn't the predator, she was the prey. The gavel came down, sharp and final. And with that strike, years of her tyranny ended in a single moment. As officers approached to escort her out, she turned, eyes scanning the courtroom. For a split second, our gazes locked, and in her stare, I didn't see rage, I didn't see power, I saw fear. The kind of fear only felt by someone who thought they'd never lose. She tried to speak, maybe to beg, maybe to threaten, but her voice cracked, and the words never came. And just like that, Karen, the woman who had bullied, manipulated, and stolen for years, was led away in silence. The neighbors shifted in their seats, stunned. The same people who once stood by her side now couldn't even meet her eyes, because deep down they knew they had let her reign last too long. But reigns always end, and this one ended in chains. When the gavel fell and Karen was led out in handcuffs, I thought the weight on my chest would vanish instantly. But peace doesn't arrive with a bang. It creeps in slowly, quietly, like the dawn after a storm. The HOA dissolved within weeks. Without Karen's iron grip and fraudulent schemes, the board collapsed under the pressure of lawsuits and investigations. The clubhouse, once a shrine to her ego, sat empty, its windows dark, the oversized oak desk abandoned like a monument to arrogance. Neighbors who once treated my land as their playground avoided my gaze when I passed them. Some muttered apologies, awkward and thin. Others said nothing at all, too ashamed to admit how easily they'd been fooled. I didn't need their words. The silence was enough. And then one morning I walked my property line. For the first time in months, the grass was undisturbed. No tire tracks, no footprints, no picnic blankets scattered across my fields, just quiet earth and the whisper of wind through the trees. I stopped at the fence, the same fence Karen once shook with rage, and rested my hand on the cold steel. What she saw as a cage, I saw as freedom. Not because it kept people out, but because it reminded me that dignity is worth defending. It would have been easy to sell out, to take her compensation deal, to let them trample what was mine, to buy temporary peace at the cost of principle. But peace built on surrender isn't peace at all. It's silence. And silence under someone else's rule is just another kind of prison. Karen learned that the hard way. The woman who once weaponized fake authority to terrify others now sat behind real bars. She didn't just lose her title, she lost everything. Her home, her reputation, her illusion of control. The same neighbors who once bowed to her rules now spoke of her name in hushed tones, erasing her from their history as if she'd never existed. Sometimes I drive past her old house. The lawn overgrown, the mailbox empty, the driveway cracked with weeds pushing through. It's just another house now, stripped of its queen, stripped of its false power. And every time I see it, I feel something simple. Relief. Because the war is over. And yet there's a lesson buried in the ruins of that HOA. Power doesn't corrupt overnight. It grows quietly, fed by compliance, watered by silence. Karen wasn't strong because she was clever. She was strong because no one stood up to her, until someone did. Until I did. And that's the part I carry with me, not the anger, not the exhaustion, the truth. That sometimes the fight for peace looks like confrontation. That sometimes dignity isn't polite, it's steel posts sunk deep into the ground, a wall that says this is mine and you will not take it. So when I sit on my porch now, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise stretch across my fields, I don't think about the war I fought. I think about the quiet, the earned quiet, the kind that no HOA sign can stake a claim on. And I smile, because in the end I didn't just win. I kept what was mine. And peace, real peace, finally came home. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one, the truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.